So, what are the plans for this old blade? First of all, the thing I need is a key. I've ordered a new ignition barrel, because again, I've bought another bike without a key. I did buy a blank key and I tried to cut it to profile using the barrel from the petrol cap. Now, the petrol cap was easy to get into, and I thought if I filed it to a similar profile and got the barrel of the petrol cap opening with a key, it should be fine and should work, but it didn't. Obviously, the ignition has a bit more security than the petrol cap. So again, now I'm just waiting for a new ignition for this. When that does come, I am going to try and start it. I can't see why it shouldn't. It'll probably be lumpy. The fuel smells awful that's left in the petrol tank, and there's some dripping out of the carbs. So no doubt the carbs will need a little bit of work, but if it'll start, that'll be a bonus. Like I say, it was running when it was parked away over 10 years ago, so I can't see why it wouldn't start. And then pretty much everything needs to do into it. I'm going to strip all the plastics off so I can see where I'm going. The brakes work, which is something. The suspension is almost soft and dead. It'll need a total refurb of the forks. I want to take it apart and do things like tidy up these covers. I'll try and rub it down with something and see if it'll clean up with a bit of polish. But I think it'll need painting or maybe Cerakoting. I want to give that a try. The frame, I'm going to try and rub that down. It should, I think, rub down with a bit of Scotch-Brite or something and then bring that back to some sort of luster. The forks are looking a bit rough. They may need re-chroming. What else? The bodywork seems okay. There's a few little scuffs here and there. You know, it is a 30-odd-year-old bike, I think. There's one little tiny crack in the fairing, and that's what I did when I tried to move it. It leaned against it slightly. So little things like this, I'm not sure why the ECU is loose. It seems to have rusted away from its mounting point somehow. So I'm going to try and rivet that back together. So I'm going to strip it all out. The battery's obviously dead. It won't even take a charge. So I think we'll get the bike up on the stand and we'll get all the plastics off. I might put the camera on some sort of time warp thing so you can watch me do it. It's not particularly interesting to watch. There we go, that was a little fiddly, particularly the front end. Now we've got all the bodywork off, we can see what's going on and we can see what we're working with. The next job now is to try and start it, and then we're going to start the full strip down. Okay, the only thing I've done before starting this bike up is check the oil. I've opened up the airbox to make sure there's no mice living in there. And I'm just going to start it. So I've got two ignitions on this bike, and that's because this one came without a key and I bought a second-hand ignition that was already attached to the top yoke. Okay, so I've turned the fuel on and it started pissing out fuel from this, which appears to be, I think, a carburetor overflow pipe. So I've turned the fuel off, but I'm going to still try and start it. So I've done nothing to this bike apart from check the oil. Let's see if it'll go. Pull the choke out. Try with the fuel on. That's pissing fuel straight out. That's weird. So unless all the unless the carb is totally blocked, let's turn that off for a second. I'm going to just try and take the airbox off. Okay, so these are the overflows, and it's pissing out of that pipe. These sliders aren't moving on any single one of them. Now, I've never worked on this type of carb before. Maybe they don't, but they're not moving at all. So I think the best thing I can do first is take this carb apart, clean it, and then try again. I'm going to change these pipes because they're all solid. Okay, I'm struggling to get these carbs off. They're a pain in the arse. Probably because the rubbers are hard. I have now though managed to get these to move. They were all stuck really tight and I didn't want to force them, but I give them a little push. It's coming up now. So there's that one. That one's quite sticky. That one's stuck halfway. Trying his best to come down. I'm wondering whether to try and start it again now that they move. Okay, let's give it another little go. So let's turn the fuel on first. The carb slider, sorry, the choke slider doesn't. Gosh, those carbs are going to have to come off. This is pissing out fuel everywhere. There we are. Okay, so we've got them off. So we got the carbs off. I had to resort to a crowbar, which I didn't really want to do. But very, very carefully, I lifted them off. It's just these rubbers go hard. If you look down here, this is number 4. Obviously, this is the wrong way around. 4, 3, 2, pretty clean. 1, quite rusty. And so is the fuel intake near where the valves are. So maybe when it was parked, I would guess that the valves were slightly open in a position that allowed moisture to get in. I don't know. So I'm going to take this all apart. I'm not going to give it a massive clean, I don't think. I'm just going to get it enough so I can maybe start the bike. Okay, let's have a look what these are like inside. Very green. Ooh, you're heavy. Okay. Oh, still one in there. I think these are going to have a full clean, to be perfectly honest. That's the worst of it. Lots of stuff inside the carbs were covered in this gunky, gluey type stuff. So just slightly off camera, I attempted to move these, the floats, and they all made a cracking, kind of creaking noise as if they are obviously stuck. So that could be the problem, that they're stuck open, but we're going to get them off anyway. Okay, let's look at the state of some of these. That's about as bad as I've ever seen. They are crusty. So I'm going to put those in some brass clock cleaner. These are the floor tight needles. So I'm pretty sure I found the reason why it won't start. There's big holes in the diaphragms. These two are okay, as they should be. But these two have just rotted out. Crikey. Almost looks like they've caught fire. So I better get some new ones of those, and I'm sure they're very, very reasonably priced. Now the kit I used was this cheapie I got off eBay. It only cost £20. I wasn't intending to go that cheap, but I couldn't get these anywhere else, and I needed two of them. Unfortunately, they weren't the right size. They're supposed to be, it's for the right bike, but they were slightly undersized. Now the only way I could get them to fit was to soak them in petrol overnight, so the rubber kind of expanded, and then they seemed to fit. It came with lots of stuff, but the only things I really used were the seals. So all the rubber O-rings and seals. The jets and everything look okay, but I didn't feel like I wanted to use them. It comes with floats as well, which is quite handy because the floats in these are apparently unadjustable. So when they go out of alignment, you've got to change them for another one. So the first two have the original diaphragms, and the second two have aftermarket cheapos. Now when I open the diaphragm here, open the slider, it seems to return back with reasonable control. And these tend to snap back a little quicker. Got a funny feeling the diaphragms aren't fitting properly. I'm going to open those up and check again. So I've had another little play around with them, but I think the diaphragms are just not seating properly. It's a little bit better, it's not snapping shut. That one is. I'm going to try and run it anyway. I'm going to connect this up to see if it leaks fuel. If I get the bike firing, then we'll worry about getting some more diaphragms from somewhere. They're a bit hard to get, you know. I did want to do this with good quality, maybe keister kits, but I couldn't get any diaphragms anywhere, so I just went for the cheap one, just to see what will happen. So I'm just going to connect this up to some fuel. Okay, so I connected it up, and I heard the fuel gurgling around there, and eventually it started coming out of the overflow pipes and various other orifices. So I give it a little tap and a bang. Sometimes one of the floats tend to stick. So I don't expect this to be perfect, but I just want to see if the bike will run. I may have to take this all apart again and again start from scratch, but let's see how it goes. There we go, so we've managed to get the bike started. I think it's been about 10 years since this bike actually ran. I didn't think it would take much to get it running. It's going to take a little bit of work to now get it in reasonable shape. It's going to need a lot of cleaning and dismantling. But I think we've got a reasonable bike to start with. I'm going to do a compression test just to make sure. But now the strip down starts, I'm going to try and take most of this stuff off. I'm not sure if I'm going to take the engine out unless I really need to, but I'm going to pretty much take everything off. If you like that, give us a thumbs up and I'll catch you in the next video.